Now, there's plenty to talk about today to finish the Cogito chapter, but I also said that if anybody now reads this thing on indeterminacy that I handed out and doesn't think it's right or doesn't understand it or doesn't get the great aha you're supposed to get when you read it, that now all your confusions about indeterminacy have been cleared up. If you could say so now, just yeah, this is the last time some okay. Anybody, does anybody have a problem with it? I don't particularly want to discuss it. I want to, because I think it's clear. I'm certainly ready to discuss it, because if it isn't clear, then it needs to be clarified. Yeah. You're still not clear about something. Okay.
Yeah, we could probably do this later.
With the last sentence that I see.
Sean stresses on number 2.
Well, that's the hardest one.
Yeah,
that is
color, activity,
okay, well, that's yeah, no, you're right. We should discuss that. I mean, that's just to say I would have to give Sean's lectures again. That's the deepest and hardest thing. I barely understand it myself. You heard me make the mistake of this very handout, the very end, when I said to Sean, but what you're saying is on page so-and-so. And he said, no, that's not the kind of indeterminacy I'm talking about. That's the kind of indeterminacy you're talking about, in effect. And if there's time, I'll go back over it. But I guess I'll say it, but it's just so strange. It's that you never experience that, quote, true color, which is always in the background and accounts for the normativity, namely that you're always experiencing whatever color whatever the true red, whatever red you're experiencing, you're always experiencing it as, I'm getting it better, I'm getting it worse, it would be better over there, I couldn't get it better than this is terrific, or boy, I need to do a lot to be able to see that color, change the light in the room to brighter, or take it outdoors. And what you don't ever see is that normative something or other, which is always in the background, directing you to get better or worse sights. Now, what is weird is there could be a situation in which you get the best view possible of the color. The lighting is right, your position is right, the surrounding is right. That's when it gets confusing between Sean and me. Because then I want to say, then you see the red as well as you're ever going to see it. That's right. It's just that Merleau-Ponty doesn't want to call that the true color, because the true color is this norm in the background that you never see. What you want to say about it is there can be a situation in which you sense that you cannot get a more optimal grip than you have now. And the way that color looks then is, you could call it the true color, but he's going to call it something else. That's just the best look on the color, and that's equally the 0 point of your normativity tension. That is, you're not feeling any tension, you're not feeling that there's anything you could do to make it better. When you're not feeling anything, and the color's looking just fine, that's the optimal grip. And you can get an optimal grip on the color because in the background there is this sense always there of how far you are deviating from this other sort of true color, which may be the best way to put it, it occurs to me, is you may never have an experience of this other color of the sort that now you really see it. Because it's not the sort of thing you could ever really see. It's directing you, and it's even going to direct you, if you're possibly, to the place where you think, now I really see it as best you could ever see it. But even if you never got that, the true color would still be there, so to speak, in the background, directing you and giving you the sense that you haven't ever got the true color. The true color. You haven't ever got the best view of the color you could get. The kind of optimal I'm talking about under number 1, which I've always thought was the most important thing, is a kind of optimal you might never experience. But you could, if you got the best light and everything. The other kind of true color, the one that Sean is talking about, which is, I think, certainly deeper and something that Merleau-Ponty has a weak grasp on it, so original that it comes and goes in what he writes. But that other color, or that normative color, is something you could never have an optimal grip on. That's a different issue. Now, go ahead. Did I make it any clearer?
Oh, I see.
Okay, I didn't. Go ahead. Okay.
Would it help to say that Merleau-Ponty would have pretty much the same account? Like we can get and color once and for all, but with the shape we was having.
You're right. You're right. You could still have the optimal view of the shape, where you had as clear a picture of the shape as you could get. Getting any closer, you would lose stuff. Getting any farther away, you would lose stuff. Taking another perspective, more would be hidden. There is an optimal. Yeah, for shape and the size. Well, I don't know about size. Yes, I suppose you guess if you sense that you're not in a good position to see the size, if you were closer or further, you would see the size, yes. All of the basic characteristics of the object have a true X in the background, which is always directing your sense that you could either get it better than you've got it, or telling you, look at that, no tension, you've got it. And I can say one more thing. Wait, but let me first. Then you. Well, no, because my thing is going to take us slightly astray. Go ahead. No. Where did it come from? When you
Original primary dedication, first color or shape. I just know
good, that's interesting. But it's not a sort of thing. It is just that which you name, that whatever I'm perceiving, I'm always having a sense too of whether this is the best or whether it could be better, and I have a sense of the direction that would make it better. That's that is all there is to say about this, I believe. Let me say, let me think so. I mean, it might help to say to some people that it's that you've got an attractor for red, and if you talk like Walter Freeman, and it's in that attractor landscape. When you're in that attractor, it's always experienced as, have you got to the least energy yet? There is a least energy. If you've got a category in your brain for red, or the rabbit has a category for carrot, that in your brain, of course, isn't anything you experience directly phenomenologically, but the phenomenological sort of effect of that way the brain is, that you're always sensing that you are at the bottom of the attractor or you're not, which I now am going to leave out the attractor. You're always sensing you get it better or not. And so you could say this much little bit more to you. Well, experience with red or the smell of carrot sets up your brain in such a way that you've got this kind of normativity in your experience. And the Merleau-Ponty's name for the the phenomena of this attractor, since he can't call it the brain attractor, that's the wrong level, is to say that it's the true color in the background that you never experience. Uh, is that a problem? Go ahead. I think that's probably right. I'm not sure though about that. No, and maybe he should say what you're saying, but he does think that your experience, this is what Rick was saying, there is a perspective in which the most, you could almost say information, though that's a dangerous word. I mean, but a perspective on the shape of the object in which you learn the most about the shape from that perspective. It's better to see that there are perspectives in which you don't. If you're right up against the back of the house, that's not a good perspective. If you're sort of a house, you can't ever get a very good perspective because it's a three-dimensional object. But take the red again. It's not arbitrary that in a certain lighting, uh, there you have an experience that if you change the lighting any other way, you're losing something. And it's phenomenologically arbitrary, I think, but I don't think it's neuro-arbitrary. Underlying that is the whole way the eye works and takes in the light and so forth. But it's a good question. You see her question. I'm going to say, I mean, it's harder to see with color than with shape, or because it's hard to see that but you can see it. Look, it can't be right that in a dim light you can best see the color of the tie or the book. And it also can't be the case that in a blindingly bright light you can't see the color right. So why should it be arbitrary if somewhere between there's the point in which you see the color at its best? I think it's not supposed to be arbitrary. It is probably some Smithsonian information pickup story to be told about it. I don't think, I mean, it must be an optimal of invariant pickup, no?
I think it has to be something radically different because it's all about these things.
Yes.
It's like tension and indeterminacy go hand in hand with Merleau-Ponty. That is the indeterminacy which kind of gives the tension, which guides you towards less tension, which means more determination.
Right. That's true, all that. I was just thinking that there has to be a physical story to be told about it. And it would be something about someplace there's the maximum pickup of the relevant information out of the stimulus array. I don't know if Gibson would say it, but I don't see why he shouldn't say it. But let's talk about it later. Okay, Albert.
I'll make a very brief comment because I think all you need to say is that true color is like that. There's a sense in which the true color is present. Just there's a sense in which you see the house. There is the gap that implies a kind of explanation. And I'll just add, let me go. It's very unclear.
Let me say one. I got to say one thing about that first. Yeah, but you can go around and see the back. That sounds more like my kind of true color. Under the best lighting conditions, there it is in your face, the red, which was absent before.
Then you've lost the front. Maybe when you're around looking at the back, you've lost the front.
Yes.
Never a sense in which you have the whole state, as it were, from every point of view available at once. And that's all it means to say that you can't see the red all at once.
Not for me anyway. That's exactly the difference between indeterminacy 1 and indeterminacy 2. You just told a story about the optimal and how there's whenever you try to get the optimal with houses, you lose something. But this kind of true color story is supposed to be that you never get it. Not that when you get one of it, you lose some other of it. Look, where's the true color?
Never get it simply because you can't see an object from all sides at once, and likewise you can't see a surface in all colors.
No, that's my story. No wonder everybody's confused, though. I mean, that's all correct, except it isn't as because you can't see the true red that Merleau-Ponty and Sean are when Merleau-Ponty is talking about what Sean is talking about in him. You never see the true red, and it's not like you never see the other side of the object. The true red isn't even red. The true red isn't any more red than the stimulus array or the attractor or something that is causing you to have the normative experience of being nearer or farther from it. Where's the true red quote? We can't go on and on like this, talking about a sentence which we haven't got in front of us. I have no idea where it is. There's only one place, I think. Really? Okay. No, this is my optimal. That's very interesting that you should find it. That one is you reach the red color. It's wonderful you found this. You should write it on your handout because the best statement of my position on determinacy and true color. I want a pen. Anybody got a pen? I seem to have run off without one. Anyway, okay. You got another one?
Yeah.
Okay, so 371 is exactly what I talk about, and Alva talks about too, and Merleau-Ponty certainly talks about a lot more than he talks about. Now look, I reached the real color. The real color is not the same as the true color. No wonder you're all confused. When my experience is at maximal clarity. Now, we've got to find the tactic which in effect says we never reach the true color. Can you find that? What? 356. I hope. Let's see. The real color, but yes? Yes, that's it. The real color persists beneath appearances, about 5 lines down, as the background beneath the figure that is not as seen or thought, not as a seen or thought quality, but through a non-sensory presence. Now, the back also has a non-sensory presence. No, I think the back has a sensory presence. I think I disagree with you. That I am actually sensing the presence of the back the way I'm sensing the room behind my back, I think, for Merleau. At least, but that doesn't matter. The real color, notice he's using the same word, real color. No wonder everybody's confused. But Sean always said he was confused. Now, that is Merleau-Ponty, and I've always said, well, I know what I'm talking about, and you know what you're talking about, but I never realized that he uses the name for some non-sensory presence, which is in the background, and he uses the real color for something else, which could be in the foreground, namely, when I see the color with maximum richness and optimize everything, so forth. So I'm very puzzled. Okay, wait, but you can go ahead. There's somebody I thought had, no, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if this is the same as what Alva was saying, but it seems to me like one way you could think of true color or true shape would be the property as it would be all perspective. So the house, all one, which of course we can't do. And for the color, it would be, I think what Alva was saying was being able to see the color in all lighting conditions, something like that. And so that's different than optimal grid.
No, that's not that's different. That just well, that's the optimal. The optimal for houses isn't very optimal because you lose a lot when you get it as you go around it. The optimal for color is very optimal when you get the light right and everything right, and you see the color as the best you're ever going to see it. And the idea that you could describe that color that you see under the best conditions when you're in good shape and wide awake and so forth as something not seen or thought, but a non-sensory presence, that can't be right. I mean, it can't be right about the optimal experience. Well, well, how was that? Tell me again.
The idea was what's non-sensory, what you could never sense would be the color under any lighting conditions or the house viewed from all perspectives at once. But that's what's in the background that we can never get a grip on. That is the true.
Well, why would it be the color? But the color, oh, I see. No, that would be the empiricist version. The color would then be sort of the sum total of color patches that this color looks like in all lights, in all shadows, and so forth. That's not the non-sensory presence for him, because that wouldn't have the normative. It wouldn't be drawing you toward one of them. And that's a absolute feature of the real color on 356. Whoa. Where? Okay, let's see. Let's read it.
Distinction between the sensible blackness, but that's not what he talks about.
Okay, wonderful. Where's the somber panel?
394.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yes. Well, that just says it again, but it's important. There is a sensible one, and that's number one, and that's 371 in lots and lots of places. And there is the non-sensible somber power, that's normativity, and that's on 356, and probably somewhere else in the whole of Merleau-Ponty. I can't believe that Sean made all this up from one sentence, but if he did, it's still something that Merleau-Ponty's got to hold. It's just a name for the normativity aspect, that there has to be something that is giving you the sense of now it's going well, now I could get it better. And the name of it is, I think, confusingly, very confusingly, the real color. That would great help if you called it something like the normative color. Yeah.
I don't know what this has to do with somber blackness, but I don't see why the color under all lighting conditions that underlies the way the color looks in every condition.
How does it underlie it? As a norm that draws you toward the best of them?
Well, it's going to be the best of them relative to your sensory system or something like
Well,
that.
you've got everyone. One of those patches is the best of them you've got laid out in your sort of empiricist picture. But we need a story about how the best of them actually dictates your behavior, and everything else being equal draws you toward it. That's what the empiricist can't understand, I think. Okay, you don't, but that's all right. We can discuss it more. Yeah.
Well, under type 1 indeterminacy, you say in the last sentence that objects are infinitely rich. And I'm wondering, is there a sense in which colors are objects and in the same way infinitely rich, like objects are infinitely rich in either the sense of a true color or a real color or either?
Objects, colors are infinitely rich in the sense that, and this is related to what James was just saying, there is an indefinitely large number of ways that color can look in different lighting, surrounded by other colors, when you've had a drug, and all that. And those are all the ways that color can look, and it's an infinite number of them. And you could never see them all at once. You could only see them one at a time. That's my story, not John's story.
Well, is that color the true color or the real color that,
Unfortunately, Merleau-Ponty uses real color for both of them. But in fact, so we need, I don't know what to say. I'm going to just, for our conversation, we're going to call my story the real color story, which is the one we're having now. That there is a red that is the best red, and there is an infinite number of other ways that red can appear. And maybe that best red never appears. Maybe you could just never get the best lighting on it. That would be all right too. Let's call that the real color. Let's call Sean's, because he calls it that, the true color, which I'm going to call a normative color. That's different. That's just altogether different. This might help. Suppose I tell you the story. Maybe you're going to get a kind of aha, and maybe it's going to just complicate things. But there were experiments done, or I wish we had Eric here who knows more about these psychological things. But they were done a while back when how was I doing? I was writing my computer book, so it must have been about in the 70s. And maybe they've been done since too by a psychologist who was, I think, at the University of Oregon named Posner. If I say all this, some of you may recognize it and tell me more. He produced, using a computer, all sorts of distortions of an optimal figure. Of a particular figure. Optimal doesn't mean anything yet. It was the figure of which the computer program had generated all these various distortions. And in that sense, it was the paradigm of this abstract sort of figure, because every one of the distortions could be experienced as more or less far from it if you saw it. But he then showed people pictures or whatever of all these figures which were distortions of this paradigm figure. And they could judge them as better or worse, even though they'd never seen the paradigm figure. Isn't that nice? There's got to be formed an attractor or something. Anyway, that's the somber power. That there was the paradigm there that was directing them to be able to see every other example as better or worse, even though they'd never seen it. In this case, they could have seen it, which makes a difference from the story, and that's why I was almost afraid to tell it. But the idea is don't bring that in if you can help it. The way he set it up, it didn't ever have to be seen to do the job of making all the other figures look like good or bad examples of that kind of figure. Does that help, or does that just blur the two? I don't know. I think I should go on. This is absolutely amazing, but I think it's not at all a waste of time. But it's not what I want to talk about today. But I did say, if you had questions, you could ask, and you did, and I did my best. Okay, now before we discovered that we had gotten nowhere, I still have to go back one more time, because that whole discussion of transcendence last time was sort of circling around a very, very deep, important idea, which I didn't quite have until I went home and thought and worried about it more. I think that, there were two views of transcendence running around. But I think one of them was, well, let me say something first. What met my, okay. He said after class, this is separate, I want to get this off the table. He said after class that transcendence is a very bad word for this whole discussion, because it's built into the notion of transcendence that something inner transcends to the outer. So the transcendence would be the mind transcends, gets outside itself to the transcendent object. So built into the very word transcendence in the philosophical use of it is exactly the view you don't want. So no wonder if lots of people were confused, they were confused. Now this is no accident that the very worst word to express, remember, keep in mind that what we're really trying to talk about is the empty openness that we are a field and all that. I'll come back to that. But talking about some transcending from, in Husserl, you transcend from the inner to the outer. And that makes sense of the word transcendence. Well, Heidegger had a perverse, it's all Heidegger's fault. He has an amazing desire to take other people's terminology and turn it on its head and make it mean exactly the opposite of what they meant it to mean and sort of take it away from them. It's a great game. He took Husserl's word transcendence and made it mean exactly the opposite of what it meant for Husserl, where there's no longer a coming out from the inner to the outer, from the inside to the outside, from the mind to the world. That's exactly what Heidegger wants to deny, and he denies it by saying Dasein is transcendence. And that means, to talk funny Heideggerian, Dasein is the world existable. And that's a very Merleau-Ponty-like phrase. That's in being in time. So to begin with, you've got to not let the word transcendent fool you, and just ask yourself, what else could it be besides coming from the inner to the outer? Well, I think that it means something different in Husserl even than this old sort of Cartesian kind of transcendence. Husserl's very strong in another kind of thing. I think that not that Husserl would perhaps deny that transcendence, I don't know. But he has his own interesting view of what transcendence is, namely that there's always more to the perceptual object than I can ever experience, that it belongs to the objects of experience, that they've got more aspects, you can see them under more conditions, and so forth. That's what it is to be an object of perceptual experience. And Husserl's got that. He lived it. I don't know if he discovered it. C.I. Lewis had it too, but they were about contemporaries. And it's right phenomenology. So now we've got Husserl transcendence. It isn't the mind going out toward the world. It's that the object always has more to it than we can ever experience. Again, a weird transformation of what you would think the word could normally mean. But Husserl transcendence then is totally different from Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty transcendence. Not that Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty want to deny. Far from it. They both agree. There's more to the object of experience than I can ever experience. But they want to co-opt the word transcendence for the business of being an empty head turned towards the world, for the ekstase. This ekstase business is how I am always already outside of myself, to talk like Heidegger again, where there isn't even any myself. I'm just always already outside, period. So that one is on 429, just to occasionally touch up with the text. This is the one that Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, just in the beginning of the Cogito chapter, the third sentence. I probably have already read it, I don't remember. My life is constantly thrown headlong into transcendent things and passes wholly outside me. Now, transcendent things are the normal use of transcendence. That means things in the world. Calling them transcendent things is a very misleading thing to do, because that already suggests the whole inner outer story, that you're just supposed to think of them as things out in the world. And it passes wholly, so my life passes wholly outside me. And of course, he says it amazingly many different ways. Well, but now what I realized on yesterday is that these two are very interestingly related. There's the Heidegger, just call them the Husserl idea and the Heidegger idea. And now the Merleau-Ponty idea is the brilliant move of putting them two together and having both meanings of transcendence going all the time. And that what Merleau-Ponty wants to say is, because I'm absorbed in the object when I'm coping, the fact that the object has more aspects than I can ever cope with is essentially correlated with the way that I am always outside myself. I'm always outside myself at the ground floor level as a transparent coping being, and that has the two sides of it, of the two sides of the coin. The object has always got more to it than I'll ever experience, and I'm always outside myself, trying constantly to get a better and better and better grip and a better and better sense of that object. I think that's the interesting thing. They come to sum it up. The two senses of transcendence in Husserl and Heidegger come together in motor intentionality. Motor intentionality just is this combination of a totally always more object and a being that is always totally committed to constantly revealing more about the object. Now, of course, there's lots more about us than that. But remember, when Merleau-Ponty says that we are empty heads turned toward the world, or all our experience, how as I just read, is out there in the world, he's talking not about how we appear to ourselves on reflection. I'll come back to that. But how we experience ourselves, if you even do experience yourself, how we are when we are completely committed and involved in coping. That's the picture. If you start asking, well, how am I when I think and sit at home and do the cogito and have an autobiography and have a breakdown and so forth, you won't find the phenomena. To find the phenomena, you've got to try to capture your unreflective, ongoing, successful, involved coping. Then you get it. Yeah.
So just to be clear, from what you said, it seems like still understanding of things and
Good. Good. Yes. And Merleau-Ponty's is the transcendence of motor intentionality, which puts them together.
Right.
Wouldn't that be nice? I think that's just wonderful. We can all just go home. That's a thought for the day. But I have other thoughts, so we better go on. It turns out that at the end of the cogito chapter, when he's finally putting it all together, he starts saying things like this. Though they're pretty obscure, I think if you look at them now in the light of the special kind of openness I've got, namely the openness that is being drawn into the coping with things and constantly revealing more and more about them, then you get the tacit cogito. Remember, I just said something, but I didn't explain it. The tacit cogito is the experience you got when you're doing your motor intentional thing, so to speak. It's not the reflective cogito. It's not an I think that's thinking about itself, which is Descartes kind of reflection. It's not a cogito put into words, which is also Cartesian. The I thing is as a Cartesian concept. It's supposed to be the tacit cogito. That means the cogito which is in my most fundamental experience. And that's what he's trying to get at in the end, because the chapter is aiming at getting to the tacit cogito, which is in another sense you could say, well, why is Merleau-Ponty substituting for Descartes' most basic sense of myself doing my most basic essential thing? Whatever that is, that's going to be Merleau-Ponty's cogito. And it's going to be, but whatever it is that goes on in this unreflective, pre-linguistic, or it doesn't need to be linguistic, absorbed coping. Okay, now let's read the 474, about 5 lines down, starting on the right. I am not myself a succession of psychic acts, with a Clippo talk, nor for that matter a nuclear I who brings them together into a synthetic unity, Kant talk, but one single experience inseparable from itself, one single living cohesion, one temporality engaged from birth in making itself progressively explicit, in confirming that cohesion in each successive present. That's the ongoing coping, presumably, trying to always get a maximum or a more maximum grip on yourself and the world. And it is this advent, or again, this transcendental event that the cogito retrieves. Look, I put in that extra sentence, that is the tacit cogito. And why is it a transcendental event? Well, since all was flowing around as the word transcendental, I thought I would just throw this last one. Remember, transcendental can mean the condition of the possibility of the experience of objects. That's Kant's definition. And I think he's taking that from Kant, taking it over. The transcendental event, that is the condition of the possibility of my experience of perceptual objects, is ongoing coping toward attaining an optimal grip, I think. And now I want to do one more, and again on 475, about 5 lines down. Let's start on the far 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 475, 7 lines down. My existence on the right side, in the middle of the sentence, my existence as subjectivity is merely one with my existence as a body and with the existence of the world. I mean, the subjectivity is the Cartesian subject. It's being turned into the way the body and the world exist. And you can use the Heidegger slogan as sort of my existence is the world, or I'm the world existingly. And because the subject I am, you see, he's taken the word subject now away from Descartes. When taken concretely, is and unreflected, is inseparable from this body and this world. The ontological world and body, which we find at the core of the subject, are not the world or the body as idea, but on the one hand, the world itself contracted into a comprehensive grasp, and on the other, the body itself as knowing body. Knowing body is, you've got to read as know-how body, as skilled body, as grasping body. It would have been nicer if we said that. This is how I would read it. So there's the world itself as graspable, always more optimally, always more explicitly. And there's me as grasping it, always more optimally and more explicitly, or at least moving toward that, drawn toward that by the normativity of the whole thing. Okay, now I will come back to that, so you needn't look too puzzled. Well, but I see I have another one. This all shows up again at the end of my lecture if I had time, because I jumped to the tacit cogito, but I thought it was the right thing to do, given that we are in the transcendence business. Okay, I see that I want to do something also on 438. Again, I'm still trying to get used to the word transcendence. And so when he says about 8 lines down, there is no sphere of immanence, that's Husserl talk, no realm in which my consciousness is fully at home and secure against all risk of error. That would be the sphere of immanence, would be the sphere that you transcend. And this is the view he's against, of course. There is no immanence, and in that sense, no transcendence. The acts of the eye are of such a nature that they outstrip themselves, leaving no interiority of consciousness. That's the open head story. Consciousness is transcendent through and through, not transcendence undergone. Well, there he is. That's how he takes the word away from Husserl. It's not immanence transcendence. It's all transcendence all the time. That means always already absorbed in the things it's coping with. That's transcendence undergone. It's just, again, the way I want to show you that how he's taking over this idea. One last thing where because I'm still trying to say he's putting Husserl and Heidegger together, not the Husserl immanent transcendent, but the Husserl who thinks there's always more to the object than you can perceive. He's putting that together with us who are always absorbed in that. So about a little below the middle of 438, in roughly 4 words in from the left, vision is an action, not that is internal operation, but an operation which fulfills more than it promises, which constantly outruns its premises, and is inwardly prepared only by my primordial opening upon the world, upon a field of transcendence that is once again an ekstase. I picked that sentence because it seems to bring together the opening of a field which has more and more and more in it. That's the Husserl aspect of it. The opening of a field of transcendence. And then there's the Heidegger aspect of it. It's an ekstase where that always means the outside itself openness. Okay, well, I thought that was extremely worthwhile, and I'm glad I was pushed on it. You've got to push it more further. If so, I'm happy to do it because I think that's all extremely illuminating. Yeah. No, wonderful though. You should say that. No, it's the absolute opposite. But I'm glad you mentioned it. Brentano is the perfect example of the really sensible, original use of transcendence. where the mind goes out to the world, where and there is in the mind a representation of the world which is directed toward the object in the world, and that kind of intentionality, which goes from Brentano to Husserl to Searle, which is representational intentionality, is exactly what Merleau-Ponty is, and I don't want to say denying, because he's perfectly happy to say, of course, we've got belief, which have representational content that are about, say, trees. And we can also, I imagine, just stare at a tree and have a visual experience of it, which is directed towards it, that and successfully represents it. That can be done. That's what Searle's whole brilliant book, Intentionality, spells out in great detail, and I think Merleau-Ponty would say gets it right. But Merleau-Ponty wants to say, and this is now why he's disagreeing with Brentano, motor intentionality isn't like that. It is always already outside itself. It doesn't have a representation. It's just there in the level in which we are coping. It only looks the way it looks to Brentano and Searle and Husserl when you reflect on it. Well, that's too sudden. It even looks that way when you're analyzing thought and reflection, because beliefs do have intentional content and are directed outside your mind into the world. Or it looks that, and that's fine, or it looks that way when you reflect on perception. And then you think that perception is having a visual experience that has certain intentional content and can be true or false of the world. And that's a mistake. From that, for Merleau-Ponty, if you think that what's revealed about perception on reflection is the bottom level analysis of perception, you misunderstood perception. And remember, I said that there were three objections to Descartes in what Merleau-Ponty is doing. One, all the time we spent last time on sense data and whether there were any and whether they were indubitable. Now we've got another one, and there are three, but we'll skip one for the moment. Another one is whether the I think transforms our experience. And I'm saying now that for Merleau-Ponty wants to say, yes, whenever you reflect and think, you transform the basic motor intentional coping experience. And likewise, when you reflect on perception, you transform the perception experience. And so let's go directly to that. Just in case you have an outline in front of you from last time, the three issues were the indubitableness of sensation. That's done. The next I'm going to get to, if there's time, is the transparency of thought. I skipped that one for the time being. And the last of them is whether the I think transforms our experience or not. Since you got us into Brentano, and I don't see why we should do it, there's nothing magical about the order. Let's just do that. So the claim is that what you discover about consciousness and experience on reflection changes that experience radically. The person who's got the best account of this, if anybody gets really interested in this, is Sartre. One of the first things he wrote when he was sort of downhill all his life with Sartre, I think, getting more and more away from the phenomena. He wrote this brilliant book, The Transcendence of the Ego. It isn't even a book, it's just a paper. And in there, he's got a whole story about how reflection radically transforms the structure of the experience. And it sounds very Merleau-Ponty-like. It goes, I'm here counting my cigarettes. Sartre was a chain smoker. And I'm absorbed in counting my cigarettes. And then, I don't know, I forget what happens. Something happens and I reflect. So far, the description is there's counting of cigarettes is going on. And that's it. Just absorb one cigarette after another. And then when I reflect, there becomes I'm counting my cigarettes. And there's an ego and then and an object or a subject and an object in the experience. And then he has a whole book about how the ego is constructed and how at the ground level there really isn't any me and there really isn't any I. There's just absorbed coping. And he has the whole Heidegger Merleau-Ponty picture there. And that's all I'm telling you this story for is so that you can get an idea of why somebody might want to say that reflection radically transforms experience. So, and it would be a mistake to say, and he's got lots to say about that, well, there was an ego there all along, unconsciously or marginally or whatever, but philosophically necessarily to unify it. There must have been an ego there all along. And Sartre just shoots down those positions one by one and says, no, if you're true to the phenomena, you will see that there was no ego there. Now, I want to say one more thing, which you might be after, so I'll let you talk first. There's a loose end here.
Probably not. But the question is, how are you going to talk about that?
No, that is the right question. I saw it in your eyes. That's exactly the next question. And the answer, and Sartre thinks hard about that and comes up with an answer that nobody else has taken up. I don't know whether they all just believe it or nobody believes it, but his answer is, you've got something which he calls pure reflection. And pure reflection is catching in your memory how it was just before you reflected on it. That's how he knows he was absorbed. He can get back to the experience of being absorbed in the cigarettes before he reflected on it because it's recorded that way. Now, if you like that, that's great. And if you don't, you've got a real problem how you could deal with unreflected experience. I don't know what to say about Merleau-Ponty. He seems to think it's no problem. He constantly is describing his unreflected, absorbed opening. I guess I think that everybody's doing what Sartre thinks. I mean, you have to ask yourself, how was it a minute ago before something broke down, or when I was climbing this cliff and and I was indistinguishable. People say that mountain climbers. So when I'm climbing a cliff, there's no distinction between me and the cliff. How do they know it? That's the question. Because as soon as they reflect, there is. I think they're just doing what Sartre made a kind of methodological thing out. They could remember what it was like. But there are two kinds of memory, Sartre thinks, pure and impure. The pure one is to capture in memory how it was before it happened. But there is this retroactive thing that pretty soon you can't even remember how it was until without an ego. And that's impure reflection. And then you have to get trained as a good phenomenologist, maybe, or maybe it's just luck if you've managed to capture the pure reflection part. Okay, so now where am I? Okay, I'm going to show you the pages where he says reflection is derivative. Huh, that's funny. I said 345, didn't I? And it isn't on 345. Well, let me see if it's in the spin. Yes, it's 445. I bet. Yes, but let me fix it in my notes. Okay, 445, 10 lines from the bottom. It is through my relation to things that I know myself. That's this me finding myself as a motor intentional something or other in the motor intentional activity. Inner perception follows afterwards, and would not be possible had I not already made contact with my doubt in its very object. Doubt in its object, he's in the middle of Descartes. Never mind. Just stop with inner perception follows afterwards. What's really interesting about that is it's like I wish I could find. I'm not sure that's. Give me a second. There's a place where I wrote sterile visual experience in the margin, which is a clearer version of that very same claim. Let's look at the bottom of 471. Put the two together. I'll keep your finger in there. You see, what I'm saying is that this is a claim that there's something more basic going on, and that inner perception, which would be like me having my own private visual experience with its intentional content, and you have your visual experience, and we could have, sort of very similar visual experiences. We both look out the window and see the beautiful live oak, but yours is yours and mine is mine. That's what Merleau-Ponty is trying to deny. But I think it's clear on 471, where we can hear more about Peter and Paul, or Paul and and Merleau looking at the landscape. Let's about 20 lines from the bottom. Suppose that my friend Paul and I are looking at a landscape. What precisely happens? And how many have had thorough and visual experiences? I don't want to totally waste my time talking to you all. But anyway, it's so commonsensical what Searle is saying about visual experiences that you can have it without having read him, because after all, Merleau-Ponty is writing about it without having read him. Must it be said that we both have private sensations? That, I think, are the visual experiences. That we know things but cannot communicate them to each other. That as far as pure lived experience goes, we are each incarcerated in our separate perspectives. That the landscape is not numerically the same for both of us. That it is a question only of specific identity. That is, you see your experience of the landscape, which is your experience. I mean, it's hard to deny this. It's such a complicated, strange thing, this, how to describe the difference between your perspective and my perspective without saying you're having a private experience of the object from here and I'm having a private experience of an object from there. And this is certainly what Merleau-Ponty wants to constantly say is not the phenomenon. And I gather why it seems so hard to get it is because you constantly reflect. And when you reflect, your experience is transformed into you've got your perspective, which is a private experience going on in your mind, and I've got mine. And it's very hard to capture this previous thing. But let's go on. When I consider my perception itself before any objectifying reflection, all reflection is going to turn everything into objects. There's the eye, which is a kind of object, and the object I'm seeing, which is a kind of object, and the visual experience, which is a kind of object, all spring up when you reflect. Before any objective reflection, if I get that, then you see that at no moment am I aware of being shut up within my own sensations. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I take those sensations to be what Searle calls visual experiences. But whether they are or aren't, you can get your own sense of this, just reflect and think that you are having your visual experience of me up here in front, and I'm having my visual experiences with you over there, and it's hard to even make sense of the view. We're just empty on the world, and we're not having visual experiences at all. We're just in direct contact with the world and objects and people and coping. It's so, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm torn both ways. And the way to see why you're torn both ways is when you're involved in coping, and when you're describing from the motor intentionality perspective, you're just open to the world, and there it is, and you don't have a visual experience and a perspective. You're just open to the object, and you're exploring that object, and Peter standing next to you is exploring the same object. And as soon as you think about it, it doesn't look that way. And my friend Peter and I point out to each other certain details, and Paul's finger, which is pointing out the church, is not a finger for me that I think of as oriented toward the church tower. It's not. I'm not having a visual experience of his finger either as pointing to the church tower. Or I'm just seeing his finger, and the finger shows me the tower that Paul sees, and so forth and so forth. He goes on and on trying to get you to see it that way. And realize that that's how you normally see it. Why am I talking about this? Oh, because reflecting on it turns it into private experiences of subjects, and he's trying that, and I remember where I am now. And the Cartesian mistake is to believe that when you reflect on it, you don't transform it. You just see it as it was all along. Only you were so busy coping you didn't notice that you were always having visual experiences. You were, and I was having mine. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm saying on 471 you get that, and on 472 you get it again. About 15 lines from the bottom. Something is understood immediately. The world, the subject, and so forth will never be understood as long as the world is made into an object, something thrown over against it. It is understood immediately if the world is the field of our experience, and if we are nothing but a view of the world. Well, of course, he says it over and over and over, and I just read it over and over and over because it's the crucial point. So only on reflection do you get out of this business of being a field open. And then I want to say, people who hold views like Searle's aren't wrong. They're just not on the ground level of where we are openly, just to say something different for a change, responding to the affordances. They are always on the level of either breakdown or reflection, or they come together normally, or reflection is a kind of breakdown. You could cut it up in lots of different ways. Yeah.
Well, I think what you just said was problematic. The sense in which Merleau-Ponty wants to agree with the question, but I think he also wants to say that there is something completely wrong with the previous, specifically that there really are no private sensations or inner or something or other.
Uh-huh.
If I am meant to do that,
Okay, well, that's very interesting and important. I mean, let's state the problem. It's a great paper topic here. But is he saying, when he says that we are empty heads turned toward the world, the way I was reading it, when we are at our best, when we are motor intentional beings, when we are doing what it is to be a Dasein or a motor intentional being, we certainly don't have any of that. But I would have thought he would say, in cases of breakdown, they're then, well, we know this is still further, and I think we all agree that you can get yourself into a frame of mind in which you think you've got an inner and you've got visual experiences. I mean, Searle certainly wasn't sort of wasting his time. He was really thinking about something, and Brentano and Husserl. You can get yourself into that frame of mind. And now Rick is asking the question, does Merleau-Ponty think that frame, that what you see on reflection is, as I'm saying, derivative and sort of parasitical on your experience of motor intentionality and a radical transformation of it, and it can't be read back as the truth that was going on or what was going on all along? Or is he saying something much stronger, that the whole tradition that there is a mind with visual experiences in it and pains in it and beliefs in it, which are separate from the world and directed toward the world, is just wrong? You think he's saying that?
yeah. So he's not gonna say that you don't have pain.
Yeah.
The pain is not in your mind.
Well, I suppose we could cut that up too and say, well, it's not in the world. And if you think the mind, if you make the sort of mind just the place for stuff that is really private and not in the public world, like your headache isn't accessible to me and mine to you, and
But private's different from inner.
Okay, good. Well, but do we have visual experiences, and are we just arguing about whether we should call them inner or private, or has he got the strong claim that we don't have visual experiences?
I think it's, well, neither. I think it's specifically, I can make my point logically without referring to the phenomenon.
Okay.
There is either an inner outer distinction in the kind of robust sense, or the things like when we're open to our composite solution, there's inner. Now, Merleau-Ponty actually does talk about inner outer.
Yeah.
Like love, for example, would be inner, and
Well, but he then.
but that's kind of non-problematic.
Okay. Well, yes. Let me. Well, the hearers don't get confused or lost. This is all easily understood. Maybe it isn't even a paper topic, although easily understood is probably it. But it's not a Cartesian inner, a self-sufficient sphere of contents. It's always derivative from, and as I said, parasitical on the motor intentional level. And that you wouldn't be having private experiences at all if you weren't already a conscious being, aware of its self, as coping and dealing with things. But that doesn't mean that you have to give up the idea that there is, and if you don't want to call it in the mind, you just have to say at least there is a kind of experience which you have on breakdown and on reflection, which is not the kind of experience you have when you're coping with things in the public world.
That's all I think he's saying.
Okay, well, I'm not objecting, and I don't need to say, I don't think he should say more. In fact, I read the line in order to support that. That yes, there is, but then that means that he's not denying that there can be situations in which you can have visual experiences. You just don't want to call them inner, and you don't want to think that they're self-sufficient and that they are your genuine, true access to the perception of the world. They are some kind of peculiar breakdown or entity produced by reflection. That's all right. But I mean, but you don't. So we're agreeing, I think. I mean, he's denying that they are always there, private visual experiences and mental content, and he's denying that what you discover when you do come across such things, which I think he thinks exists, you don't discover something that has been there all along and is the basis of perception and action, like intention in action, talk like Searle. Yeah, Jennifer, as the authority on Searle, you can tell us, I hope.
No,
Okay, go ahead then. Okay.
So if experiences are neither inner nor outer, where is reflection?
I think, see, now it's so hard to talk about all this. I think there are inner experiences. I mean, it's just a question of words now. Don't have it. I mean, there are experiences, and reflection is among them. Belief, reflection, visual experiences, intentions and action. I mean, go to Searle to find beautiful descriptions of them. And Husserl thinks sensations. Merleau-Ponty thinks that's a wrong move. There aren't any. But there's a lot of that is not in the shared public world and don't have any place when you're fully involved in coping, when you are an open field of motor intentional activity. That there then but there are these experiences, and we can call them inner, or that might be misleading. You could say they're mental. That might be better. Usually people say in the mind, and then you've got maybe bad ideas, too much Cartesian. But there is a mental bunch of stuff, and reflection is in it, and a lot of experience is in it. There's one, and even, I'll sort of give you one of my trump cards, I think. If you're looking for the tacit cogito, and you're looking for anything that we've got that is intrinsically private and basic, and takes the place of all the stuff that has been assumed to be intrinsic and private and basic, what could it be? I think I know the answer to that. I hope I'm right, because it's very interesting, and if I'm not, I'd be very unhappy. I think that what he's groping for, and practically says at the end of the Cogito chapter is, but he never says it explicitly, is, well, what is the private something that I've got when I'm acting motor intentionally, and is not the result of perception and is pre-linguistic? It's a sense that things are going all right or not. That's private. Each of us has his own or her own. You might be able to see the house from the same perspective I see the house, but you can't have my sense. It's sort of what headaches are supposed to be, only whereas headaches are utterly unimportant. My normative sense of whether things are going well or not is foundational. If anything, it's foundational. It's rock bottom. It explains a lot of other aspects of experience. It's totally private. It would make no sense to say it's in the mind. But he isn't. That's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to say, what is the tacit cogito? What truth is there in Descartes? Is there anything important and private that we can get at to talk about? And the answer is yes. We have a sense of how it's going. That's absolutely crucial. That's the movement toward and away from optimal grip. You can't understand perception or action or motor intentionality without it. I think that's the tacit cogito. I'm not sure, because I looked and there's no line that says it. Yeah. Oh, yes, I can, I think. Private are things that I sort of accidentally know and you don't know, like things in my autobiography. Like it's private that let's say it would be private if I was keeping it a secret, that some bad thing happened I did some bad thing in my childhood or something. I never told anybody, and I'm not going to tell anybody. That's private. but it's not intrinsically private. I could tell anybody. And in therapy, maybe my therapist could figure it out without my ever even telling him. That's important. There are lots of stuff about that I don't know about you and you don't know about me. But the question is, for philosophers, is there anything that is intrinsically, essentially private? And then you think, well, maybe your visual experiences, your intentions in action, your desires, your feelings like love. Those are all candidates for what is intrinsically private. And Merleau-Ponty wants to say, no, none of that is. That is, I can't have your love, but it isn't somehow a secret you can keep. I mean, I can see whether you're in love. I might even be able to do it better than you can tell whether you're in love. So, so So I don't know if there's anything intrinsically private, according to Merleau-Ponty. Uh, I got two choices. I think there is lots that's intrinsically private, according to Merleau-Ponty. And maybe I think we're just disagreeing.
That's where I was agreeing.
No. Because surely you don't want to say the pains aren't intrinsically private, do you? And I think my pains are intrinsically private. I think
Why did you say private? Just, my pains are my pains, they're not your pains.
I can't feel your pain.
Dirty word.
Thank you. Well, I don't know. I can't feel your pains. And they become my pains. And my tickles and itches, and to add a whole bunch of other things that Austin adds when he talks about these things. I think the issue is supposed to be not whether they're private, but whether they're important. And the idea, I think, but I'm not sure, is really, and I think this is Austin too, there's a lot of sort of private garbage around, tickles, itches, and pains and so forth, but they just don't do any important role. You can't ground knowledge in them. You can't ground your understanding of other minds in them. But all the important stuff, I'm going to take this back in a minute, if that's all right. All the important stuff isn't private. It's something that you could tell me, or I could find out about you, even you might not know it about you, or there are facts about you that somebody might well know. And so, but all that stuff isn't private. So the collection of stuff that's private is just not interesting. Maybe your dreams are in this private area. Maybe your intentions are in this private area. I'm not sure about that, because I can sometimes tell. By the way, does anybody read Ryle's Concept of Mind anymore in any course? I mean, the book that tries to show what I'm just saying more than any other book is Gilbert Ryle's The Concept of Mind, where he's out to get Descartes, and the whole idea that there's anything private. He tries to get rid of pains. Oh, I want to say one more thing, though, so I don't seem to contradict myself, and then you guys can talk. Of course, I want to say that I think that Merleau-Ponty thinks that there is something intrinsically private and important. And that's your sense of whether you're moving toward an optimal or away from an optimal. That's got to be built in on the ground floor of motor intentionality. And I have mine and you have yours, and it's not the kind of thing you could ever communicate, your feeling of whether you're getting a better grip or not. And it's not trivial garbage like the tickles and the itches and the pains. And that's the tacit cogito, I think. And I would love to get feedback about this. And not as many people are coming to office hours anymore to try to beat on me and help me, so please do.
Yeah, Al, I don't understand the nature of your thing, but that's the tacit cogito. Could you parse it grammatically when you understand it? Cogito is that was meant to be the name for a certain performative pattern of reasoning that the mind engaged in. What content is
I see. Well, good. I see that I take him to be saying that the I think, which is the cogito, is a special experience that Descartes was analyzing. And I don't want to go into now how much of it is private or not, or inner or not. That's whatever it is that Descartes is talking about under the cogito, the I think. It's supposed to be indubitable. It's supposed to be transparent. It's supposed to be foundational in that it's your sense of what's really going on. You're seeming to see, you're seeming to think, and so forth. It's rock bottom. and so forth. And clearly, the tacit cogito is not that. But then, but it's also supposed to be something that is the deepest thing about me, the cogito. I mean, I find in there the I think. Now, what is there that is really about me and private and foundational? That would be, I think, the tacit cogito. The tacit cogito certainly isn't how am I it sort of unthematically and implicitly doing an I think, because then that would be something Merleau-Ponty wouldn't want to say in a million years. But he's trying to find the tacit cogito. He says that. And he says it here, I happen to know because I came across it. The first time he says it, I think, is at the 282, at the end of, no, that's not it. Maybe it's the end of the space chapter. If it isn't, I give up. But there was the place where he points ahead to it. Yeah, here it is. 347 at the bottom. The very last. There is a world for me because I'm not unaware of myself. See, he's trying to get some kind of an awareness which is not reflective and yet involved in there being a world. And I'm not concealed from myself because I have a world. This pre-conscious possession of the world remains to be analyzed in the pre-reflective cogito. I take it several things. The pre-reflective cogito is the same as the tacit cogito, that it's what he's talking about in the chapter called the cogito, and that it's got to do with some way that I am aware of myself and something very important about me that Descartes was getting at wrongly, but which we have to get the right phenomenology
I think
of.
I was confused by the fact that the phrase, the cogito, is sometimes used as the proper name for Descartes' contribution.
Okay, yes.
Um,
Well, that's not what happened,
and,
right?
and so this is just cogito, which is a short for
The basic experience of myself that I have when I'm doing motor intentionality. That's what it's for.
so I'm introduced, therefore I am.
My feeling things are going well or badly. Therefore, that there is something. I mean, the I you can't even have it there. I think it's going well or badly. I don't even know if you can really say for me. I think the bottom line is it's going well or badly.
Balance is in jeopardy, therefore the world exists.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if this is really good, but it seems that everyone has their own, you know, passive coding, dealing with their environment as individuals, or in this absorbed coping as individuals. Each and every one of us has this own way of dealing with the world that no one has a unique.
Yeah. Well,
So that logically follows that if everyone has something that's different, that everyone has the same thing.
I'm not sure, but I disagree. Before that, you turned it into a style of coping. And it's true, I think, that Merleau-Ponty thinks each of us have our own individual style of coping. But I think that's not inner enough. I mean, that you see my style of coping. In fact, you may see better my style of coping and see how the way I talk and the way I move and the way I write and so forth all has a common style of coping. But I don't think that's inner, quote unquote, enough, private enough. But I think my sense of how it's going, whether I'm moving toward or away from an optimal grip, that's private. But it isn't. Doesn't have to be sort of idiosyncratic and individual like the style. I mean,
But you knowing how you're doing is only possible via reflection.
no, I'm glad you're saying that. I mean, that people have to say brave things and be wrong. No, I mean, that's exactly wrong. You have a feeling of tension when you are not getting a good look at something. But let's go back to the picture in the museum. Unreflectively, you're drawn toward the point of this. I mean, this is so wrong. This is so deep. It's the whole point of the book is you're drawn toward the optimal as a case of motor intentionality. That's what you're doing all the time is trying to get a better grip on
What I'm saying is that you only come to know about this passive inner ability
only.
by virtue of this reflection in which you're recognizing it.
Yes.
So how can it be something that's
Well,
private.
okay.
It's something that you just let everyone have.
Well, if you're making the logical point that it's a class of things, each of which has, each of us has an instance of it, I don't see that's a problem. Yet, each of us are moving to optimize our grip on the world, and that means that there's some general something called, something that falls under the category, the sense of optimizing your grip on the world, or the sense of tension and equilibrium. And the point is, every instance of that concept is a private something or other that a particular case of motor intentionality and a particular case of openness on the world, like this one, has. That I don't see any problem with that. Before you say something, that he has said anything, or so you say something.
Does the theory of something is
What? Ego? No. That's not why I told the start story. There doesn't have to be any harm. The more you're absorbed in coping, I think you should think about sport whenever you think about Merleau-Ponty. Think about whatever it is to be most totally absorbed and in whatever it is you're doing. Then I'm sorry, it's right. Merleau-Ponty just goes along with the same view. There isn't any I'm counting the cigarettes or I'm climbing this mountain or I'm speaking. Just and it would go on even better. Now you can't say, because this is true reflected, if I move this way, that your lit body doesn't need that. Your lit body just senses that it's not going as well as it could be and moves in a way to make it better. That's what the offer the lit body does. That's its job. It does that. You won't move because the brain is pushed a certain way. That's not our job to talk about that. There's not going to be an ego.
well, who's thinking now?
Who's seeking now? Not who. What? The lived body of a human being is seeking the optimal. When I'm seeing, it's my body seeking the optimal, but there's no I in the spirit. Okay, let's see how we're doing. I'll listen to two questions, but I won't have time to answer them. Yeah.
Well, I think it's definitely a connection between the two cogito and the consensus. So, it's part of the evolutionary thing that we know, which gets us all the rest of our knowledge. His kind of transcendent gets us into the world, as it were, and his classic cogito is my discovering myself as a lived body in the world already.
Yes, and good. But when you say my discovering myself as, you've got to be careful, and it shouldn't sound reflective. I think it should just sound. Or how about I discover on pure reflection in my memory that I was, or that there was pure optimizing coping going on. Yes, something like that. Okay, you get the last comment. I like that. You like that? Yes. I guess the answer, boy, that opens a whole new ballgame. That suggests that the coping, there is something called intercorporeality. We talked about that back in the Being with Others. So the word is never in Being and Time. In Phenomenology of Perception, he uses the term in a late paper, The Eye and the Mind. But by way of intercorporeality, I don't know whether I pick up directly your attention and your movement away and toward the optimal or not. But if it doesn't matter, I should say, because the tacit cogito it's not a crucial feature of the tacit cogito, perhaps. I'm just saying this, that it be private. What's the crucial feature of the tacit cogito is that it be my rock bottom experience of myself. And if somebody else could tune in on it, intercorporeality wise, I think that's all right. I make too much of a fuss about private, is what you're saying. It's really, what is my basic experience of myself, unreflective, motor intentionally coping, that's, and the answer is only this, the sense that it's going well or it's not. That's the best I could do. Okay.